Odysseus has been years on his journey now, sailing from one ordeal to another, and more to come. Having gotten past the sirens, Odysseus knows his route will take the ship past the deadly whirlpool Charybdis and the many-headed monster Scylla, who lives in a cave above the sea. And between them he must make a choice. Which is the lesser evil?
He always has choices. He has the choice of going past Scylla or taking the route of the whirlpool, and he's been told that if he takes the whirlpool, it's most likely that the whole ship will be destroyed and sucked down into this terrible Charybdis. On the other hand, he knows that if he goes past Scylla, he will lose 6 men. So he decides not to tell his men about that, because he realizes that if they knew that 6 of them would die, they would stop rowing in that direction. And he tries to fight Scylla, but she cannot be fought. He has been told that too. And before he even sees her coming, Scylla has taken 6 of his men and is eating them up in the mouth of her cave. And he thinks this is the most horrible sight he's ever seen. But he gets through.
We're often faced with lousy choices. Life seems to be a long succession of trade-offs, and survival itself comes at a price, as Odysseus has learned. Homecoming is an eternal theme, an archetype, as strong today as in the time of Odysseus.
The theme of homecoming appeals to everyone. Everyone who's fought in a foreign war, people who've taken hazardous journeys of any kind, even to the casual journey. There's great pleasure in coming home to the place that is yours, that is familiar to you, and to the people especially.
Last drill. Go for it, Donna.
These veterans of World War II gather often at a Northern Virginia hardware store to lend a helping hand and then trade stories of war and homecoming.
I finally got home. My dad worked in a bakery shop, and I walked in the bakery shop, and he saw me, and he went up to his boss, and he said, "Bob's home." That's it. And we took off. It was the most pleasant thing you ever saw.
Homecoming means coming back to the first dawn, to the first sounds, to the trees that you first saw. That is unforgettable. Whatever else you see, they don't replace them. So memory is what keeps you here.
Between the Trojan War and the sea voyage, Odysseus has been away from the kingdom of Ithaca for 20 years. In the meantime, the young men of the kingdom have taken over his household. They are demanding that his wife, Penelope, give her husband up for dead and marry one of them. But Penelope has stalled them. She says that when she completes the shroud she is weaving, she will marry. But she weaves by day and secretly unweaves by night.
If she was giving in to the suitors, then there would not be any kingdom for her and for her son. So she found a way of postponing the marriage so she can gain time.
When are these people going to go home? They have been here forever. They are eating us out of house and home. And what's more, they're trying to marry the lady of the house. And in the meantime, they are amusing themselves with the women servants. Bad, bad guess.
Finally, Odysseus reaches Ithaca. But the goddess Athena has warned about the traitors who lie in wait for him at the palace. And he goes home disguised as a beggar.
He's the outsider. There's a wonderful irony. We know who he is. We see the suitors doing things that they ought not to be doing to any beggar, but especially not to this beggar, because this beggar is the king, and he will, we know, reestablish himself.
Alms for a child of misfortune.
So there's a kind of tension that builds, and we wonder how Odysseus is going to achieve this, because he's all alone, one man against 100+ suitors. How's he going to do this?
The queen.
The besieged Penelope finally proposes a contest to the suitors. She will marry the man who can string the bow that belonged to her husband and shoot an arrow through a dozen axes.
Homer has built the picture of them as ugly to make us feel not only comfortable, but I think very satisfied with that magnificent moment when one after the other of these little twerps has tried and not been able to string the bow, and that wonderful moment when Odysseus, it's the fantasy we all have. It's being pulled out of the audience to step onto the basketball court and being the superstar that no one knew was the superstar. Odysseus, the beggar, suddenly stands up straight and strong, with ease strings the bow, bam, bam, bam. And man, is that satisfying to our baser and my baser and uglier instincts.
The tests are over, at least for now. And for the first time in 20 years, Odysseus and Penelope embrace. Really home at last.
That's not icing on the cake. That's the very cake itself. That's the very substance of the poem. That coming back to home, coming back to earth, embracing it, and finding that's where one has begun and where one wants to go ultimately.
So joy is now to her the sight of her husband vivid in her gaze, that her white arms embracing his neck would never for a moment let him go. Dawn with her rose-red fingers might have shone upon their tears, if with her glinting eyes Athena had not thought of one more thing. She held back the night, and night lingered long at the western edge of the earth, while in the east she reigned in the dawn. While in the east, she reigned in the dawn.
But now, if the Odyssey is life, can the still living Odysseus be finished with his struggle? Not quite. After setting his own house in order, he must negotiate a truce between his supporters and the relatives of the suitors he has just slain. And then there's the prophecy. While visiting Hades, he met the ancient seer Tiresias, who prophesied his successful return and said he would then have to leave again.
Thereupon, take a well-fitted oar, and go on till you arrive at the place of men who do not know the sea, and eat a food that has not been mixed with salt, and where they do not know about ships with purple cheeks, or about well-fitted oars that are the wings of ships. And I will tell you a very plain token. Do not forget it. When you meet a man who mistakes your oar for a winnowing fan, then set your well-fitted oar fast in the earth, and make fine sacrifices to the Lord Poseidon. Then go back home, and sacrifice sacred hecatombs to the immortal gods who possess broad heaven. Far from the sea will death come ever so gently to your person, and slay you when you are worn out with sleek old age, and the people about you will be happy.
Throughout the Odyssey, there has been the old philosophical conflict between fate and free will. The gods are stage managers of everything that happens, and yet Odysseus also owes his survival to his own cleverness and pluck. They created the role, but he acted it. The performance was all his.
It's a little bit like when we finally arrive, we humans, we die. But what we all want, and what Odysseus above all has, is to be able to say, not only when he gets home, but when he's on his deathbed, man, I lived a life. And that's part of what makes him both such a rich source of entertainment and a kind of inspiration who on the grand scale is what each of us wants to be, even if we can only hope to do it on a smaller scale.